Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, I'm going to take you through the official police report. It's around about 4 pages, and I was going to touch on a couple of other things like Casey apparently weeping, but I see another channel has already covered that. So I'm just going to stick to the police report. And so the report reads as follows. It's a supplemental report. The officer's name is J. Hyneman, badge number 2X1516. It's dated the 9th of May 2022. Crime, resisting law enforcement using a vehicle. Date of occurrence 9th of May 2022. Place, Birch Drive between US Highway 41 and Birch Park, I guess. And so this is the statement of Officer Hyneman. He says, I was on my way to assist the Vanderburg County Sheriff's Office with a vehicle pursuit that had crashed out near Birch Drive. When I arrived, the suspect vehicle, a dark-colored Cadillac passenger car, was on its side in the ditch on the north side of Birch Drive, with several unmarked police vehicles touching the suspect vehicle. As I approached the vehicle, I saw a male in handcuffs being escorted from the wrecked vehicle by a law enforcement officer. As I came up on the suspect vehicle, I noticed law enforcement officers were holding the car at gunpoint. I heard a few officers talking back and forth about how another suspect was still in the vehicle. They were communicating about how the suspect had shot herself and still had the firearm in her right hand. After a short discussion about how to get the female suspect from the vehicle, it was decided to open the sunroof, secure the firearm from her hands, and then pull her from the vehicle. I opened the sunroof's interior cover and then pressed the button to open the sunroof. The sunroof opened and I crawled into the vehicle to secure the firearm. I secured the firearm by handing it over to another law enforcement officer that was behind me. I then pulled the suspect from the vehicle by her wrists, where EMTs and firefighters rendered further medical aid. And obviously at this point, Vicky was actually still alive and she would remain alive for several more hours. And now we go into the next officer's report. Officer S. Shahine, I think. So that officer says, I had put myself en route to an outside agency assist near the Motel 41 on US Highway 41. VCSO, I think it's something county sheriff's office, had requested that multiple units assist due to the high level priority of the people of interest. VCSO were attempting to stop a charcoal grey in color Cadillac with 2 wanted fugitives from Alabama, to which the vehicle began to flee north around on US Highway 41 from the motel. As I approached US Highway 41 from Petersboro Road, I could hear through my radio that the vehicle had turned east onto Highway 57. The vehicle then turned into Anchor Industries parking area, to which I could see multiple units in pursuit behind the vehicle. A unit was requested to be on the south side of Anchor Industry, to which I had turned my vehicle around on US Highway 41 and began to travel east on Birch Road. I could see the vehicle traveling south on Baumgart Road, to which it then went off-road. I think it says here off-road, but I think it means off-road, into the grass field just south of Anchor Industries. I then witnessed one of the unmarked Marshall Task Force units perform a pit maneuver, causing the vehicle to turn parallel with a large ditch. I think when they say turn parallel, they basically mean this vehicle rolled. And it goes on to say, as I parked my vehicle just east of the crash on Birch Road, I immediately exited my patrol vehicle and drew out my department-issued duty weapon. I then approached the now wrecked vehicle that was currently laying on the passenger side in the ditch. the vehicle had been struck by another Marshall Task Force unit, sending the vehicle on its side into the ditch. With my duty pistol pointed at the windshield of the vehicle, I could see a male driver attempting to stick his hands out of the driver's side window. I gave multiple commands to the occupants of the vehicle so as to have them show me their hands. Now, what's quite interesting here is if, there's this statement that they were going to have a shootout. Well, if they really wanted to have a shootout, he could really have asked Vicky for her firearm, and he could then have had a shootout. And so it seems like he was a bit of a coward, or certainly he changed his mind in terms of that earlier statement. He goes on to say, I gave multiple commands to the occupants of the vehicle so as to have them show me their hands. Due to the tint on the windshield and the angle of the vehicle, I could not clearly see any other occupants inside the vehicle. While giving my verbal commands, I heard one gunshot come from inside the vehicle. TFO Bishop and TFO Robinson and I approached the vehicle, to which I could see a male sitting in the driver's seat screaming for help. So obviously after the shot had gone off, Casey was screaming for help. Multiple other TFOs had gained control of the driver's hands and were able to pull him from the driver's side of the vehicle. As the offender was pulled from the vehicle, he made statements that his wife had been shot and that she had shot herself in the head. The offender was then placed into custody. I could see a small amount of blood on the back side of the offender's head, to which he stated he had been shot also. As task force officers were placing the offender into custody, I returned to my patrol vehicle to grab my tactical vest containing a med pouch. The offender was adamant that he was okay and that we needed to tend to his wife. It's now become apparent that he had been referring to Vicky as his wife for a long time. Anyway, Sergeant Shirley arrived on the scene and took command of all EPD officers assisting. After a brief conversation with Sergeant Shirley, Lieutenant Dazer, Sheriff Wedding, Sergeant Mattingly, Detective Hands, Detective McCormick, and Captain Kirby, I was released from the scene to complete a supplement for this incident. Then there's another one from Officer Wellen and Officer Melliff. It's dated May 9, and he says, this is written by Officer Melliff. He says, we were on routine patrol when we heard the Vanderburg County detectives requesting assistance on Highway 41 and St. George Road. We proceeded to that location when we heard what sounded like the detectives were attempting to stop a fleeing vehicle. While still en route, I heard someone on the radio say the individuals in the vehicle were going to be the suspects from Alabama. Right before we arrived, I heard an officer say the vehicle had crashed out in a ditch. Upon our arrival, I observed several units surrounding a vehicle that was on its passenger side in a ditch located on the north side of Birch Drive. I observed deputies escorting a male in handcuffs away from the vehicle. I was advised there was still a female in the vehicle and she had a gun in her hand. At that time, I unholstered my department-issued firearm and held the back driver's side window due to not being able to see in the vehicle. A short time later, Officer Wellen busted out the back driver's side window and I was able to get a visual inside the vehicle. I then observed a female lying inside the vehicle holding a black-colored handgun in her right hand. It appeared the female was still breathing and had a gunshot wound to her head. While standing at the vehicle, Officer Hyneman as well as another detective who was on the scene were able to open the sunroof of the vehicle from inside the vehicle. Officer Hyneman then climbed through the sunroof and secured the firearm from the female. Officer Wellen grabbed the firearm from Officer Hyneman. Officer Hyneman began pulling the female from the vehicle through the sunroof. Once he had her partially out of the vehicle, I grabbed onto her left arm and assisted by pulling her out of the vehicle. Once she was out of the vehicle, I searched her person to confirm she did not have any other weapons on her. Medics then began treating the female for her injuries. I had no other involvement with the incident. And now we have the statement from Officer Wellen, Officer Al Wellen. He says, "We were on routine patrol when we heard a county detective requesting assistance at US Highway 41 and St. George Road. Officer Melliff and I were en route to assist. While en route, detectives initiated a pursuit on a fleeing vehicle. While en route, we were advised over the radio that the occupants were the fugitives from Alabama. We were also advised that the vehicle had wrecked at Birch and US Highway 41. On scene, I observed the suspect vehicle in the ditch on its passenger side, and there were multiple units on scene. A male was being escorted from the vehicle in handcuffs, and we were advised the female was in the vehicle armed with a firearm. Officer Melliff and I approached to cover officers who were standing around the vehicle. Another officer advised the female had suffered a gunshot wound to the head. I looked in the vehicle and observed the female with a gunshot wound. I observed the female was holding a black semi-auto handgun in her right hand with her finger on the trigger. She was holding the gun, which was laying muzzle down between her left arm and the left side of her torso. The female appeared to be breathing. I began striking the driver's side rear window with my knife to provide my partner and I a better visual of the female. Officer Beaver provided me a crowbar and I broke the window. Another officer was able to open the sunroof to allow us to access to the female. We were going to attempt to remove the weapon from the female with the extraction tools we had on scene. Before we could do so, Officer Hyneman crawled through the sunroof and grabbed the firearm from the female's hands. As other officers were removing Officer Hyneman from the vehicle, I took the firearm from him and went to the rear of the vehicle to render it safe. I removed the loaded magazine from the firearm as well as the round in the chamber. I then placed the firearm, magazine, and ejected round into an evidence bag. I kept in my possession until I was approached by a lieutenant with the Vandenberg County Sheriff's Office, who took the firearm from me. I stayed on scene until I was relieved by Sergeant Shirley. I had no further involvement in this incident.